standing now and turn around and look at the large flag in the back. 48 stars that was flying when we fought the war. Would you please pledge our allegiance to our flag and our country?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. You'll be seated. A quick thank you for our piano player, Jerry Coffin, who is in fact a veteran of the Vietnam War. Thank you. Mark, do you want this thing to now from me on?
Good morning. Thank you for coming today. We have three speakers today. I'll introduce them. This is Alan Sanderson, who will talk third. This is our second speaker, John Martin Bender, MD, who will talk second. And this is Levine. He's our first talker today. Now, I'd like to show of hands, first of all. I want everybody to guess who's the oldest up here. And number one, show of hands for Alan Sanderson. We get about 50% for Alan. Now for John Martin Bender, give me the hands. We get 27% for Levine. Okay, we're at 42%. So the last people that had their hands up, Herb wins by about 6 months. All three. Are born in 1922. Herb, what's your birthday?
July the 4th, 1922.
July the 1st, 22.
February 4th.
Okay, February, so he's got 10 months on these guys. Both of these are December babies, right? December babies for both of them. Okay, tell us what your birthday is, sir.
November 6th. That's about 48 hours from now. November 7th.
So they're pretty close to having birthdays, so you can call this your birthday gift too. All right, before we get started, we're going to start with Herb first, and John, and then Alan. I want to do some housekeeping first. The first thing, we have 2 sets of bathrooms over here, and women's and men's. We don't have those other sexes yet, but we have 2 here. So you can get up at any time. If you're cold here, we've got hand warmers up here. We have 120 hand warmers. If you like them, we have them. I'm going to go quickly around the museum to tell you one just in 4 minutes before we get to discussion. Next week, or next month, you have a handout there, and that is a gentleman's going to talk about Serval, same time, same station. It's December 2nd, 2021, 11 to 1. It will be, his name is Pete Ruthenberg. He's going to talk about Serval and what it did in World War II to help make the wings of the planes. A lot of your family probably worked at Serval. So we'd like you to sign up today if you can for that, if you'd like to show up. The second thing is, this is the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier. It is just put up here recently. We got it from the Coliseum from the 48. 48, it's just like the American Legion or the VFW. They were created about after World War I, and they donated it to us. This is the 100th anniversary in about 7 days of the Tomb of the Unknown Soldiers. The tomb of the soldier was brought back to the earth on 11/11/19, so it'll be 100 years old in Arlington Cemetery. 21 feet of carpet or grass in front of the Arlington Cemetery, and they've been honoring it 24/7 since 1948. So I'd like you to look at this at some time and keep reverence for that. There's 2 other people buried in that grave in Arlington, one from the Korean War and one from World War II. None from the Vietnam War, because everybody supposedly has been identified. To your back is a P-47, where our foundation now has collected half of what we owe on it. We'll by the end of this month, we will be at 1/2 of our $3.2 million goal. If you have any friends that would like to donate, we'd love to have the donations. Behind the LST boat, we have a LST, it's called a Higgins boat. Behind that, we have a new exhibit there, and it's about John Bethel Gresham. John Bethel Gresham died 2 days ago, 104 years ago. He was the first soldier from Indiana that served, and first one that died in World War II from Indiana, and probably the United States. There's things back there. He was exhumed in 1921, brought, shown his stake at the Coliseum. There were 20,000 people that passed his casket. So, love you to visit that exhibit. That's a new exhibit back there, not completely done. We have the Vietnam exhibit made by C. Larry Rhodes and Wally Russell, who are here today. And then back in inside the hangar in the front part, it's on the northeast corner. It's a room back there, and we have 3 simulators there. You can learn to fly. We have 2 pilots there, Richard Yeager and Spike Bell. And so you can get lessons, or you can bring your nieces, nephews, grandchildren out here. We'd love to have you out here at any time on Saturday or Sunday from 12 to 4. They will be able to learn to fly with the simulator, with supervision. And you can call ahead of time to see if we have staffing. It depends on if we have staffing. So that's enough of the preliminaries. Now we're going to first talk to Irv Levine. And Irv, I want your microphone on. You got to push that button up a little bit. And Irv, I'll help you there. Irv, just a test. Yeah, you're on. You're on. Now we got to keep it about an inch from there, from your mouth. So Irv, tell us, you enlisted in Ohio and went overseas. I'd like to hear what you worked on before you went overseas. What kind of plane did you work on before you went over there? 1 inch from your mouth. Wait a minute. It's got to be directed like this or like that. That's perfect.
P-47, the radio operator, we had push button to operate the different channels. The operator judged that was probably one of the first push button radio ever invented. We used that to communicate to the pilot. And the pilots will use that almost on the ground to show that the radio was working, so when they took off, they had communication.
Thank you. Then you left the United States, and tell us about your ship ride over to India, and then he was based in India. Tell us how long the ship took to go over there, and when you put a little bit of, when you turn the engines off to the ship.
I left the Newport News on June the 29th. We went through the Panama Canal and went down to the bottom of Australia and came back up through the China Sea and landed in Bombay on August the 4th. And it was quite, especially when you're a man lover and not a seaman. Closer?
Now, is that better? Is that better? Okay, go. You got to be about an inch away. Can you hear in the back? I want hands in the back if you can't
Can you
hear.
hear me? 1, 2, 3, 4.
You're all right now?
1, 2, 3, 4. Okay.
Is that yes or no? Can you hear him? Okay, this is, you can't hear, and this is I can hear. Okay, you got good signals, okay? All right, and keep telling us, because if you don't hear, it's not any good. Okay, now, so you got in Bombay, and so then tell us how you got across Bombay. He got to go all the way across that country, and from what I can tell, it's about 1,300 miles over to where he was going. He was going over where the Bengal tigers are. So tell us about that trip.
Okay. We got on the train and whatnot.
Just a little louder.
And with the trip on the train, we got about halfway, and we had to change trains, due to the fact that the Japanese were close by and you had a different gauge rail. So we got on another train, but lo and behold, the Army was supposed to have some men there to drive the train. They didn't show up. So what we did, we got a couple of boys in our cadre, and we took off, and we ended up about halfway. We were able to stop and get some food, and a good shower, and a good night's sleep. So we went on into Chapel, Providence, Chapel in the city, Asset Valley is a Providence. And that's how I got to my station where I worked. Thank you.
Okay, so there he is, he got to Bengal. At that time, there were 40,000 tigers in Bengal. Bengali tiger, I think we used to have one at the zoo here. Now there's about 200 tigers left. At the turn of the century, last century, there was 100,000. So he did take care of one of those tigers. So I guess it would have been 3,000 or 39,999. But anyway, then he got to tell us about what type of place you stayed at in Assam. It's in the country of Bengal, and then his duty was to get over, to get the planes over to China. Now, can you tell us a little bit about the hump, and tell us what your first impression was of a third world country?
Okay. We lived on a tea plantation, and it was, we didn't have cats or anything, but we had a little second house. This man sold tea, and we had a nice house there. It wasn't too bad, but we had to be careful because we were on stilts, so no animals could come around. It was a side story about the tiger. We were already eating lunch, and the natives came up, about 5 of them, and they wanted us to go out and kill a tiger. They had caught the tiger in a trap. Well, we had a gun, so we went out and we shot the tiger. But I couldn't shoot the tiger in captive, so I shot a little high. But we did get the tiger, and we got the skin, brought it back to the base, and we raffled off the skin, and unfortunately I didn't win it, unfortunately, one way or the other.
Okay, then, can you hear him back, yes or no? Okay, is he doing all right on volume? Can you hear him volume-wise, or you need to speak up? Just tell me, yes or no. He's okay?
Up.
You got to speak up, or a little bit louder, just like I'm yelling in this microphone. Just yell at it a little bit. Okay, so then Herb's, here he is, and he got the tiger, and he's living there. Now tell us what your duty was in Assam, or Bengal there, where we were moving planes. This is called the hump. And we have a display in the other room in that honor gallery where we have 2 soldiers here, 2 Army Air Corps people from Evansville. One was a guy named Ellis Carson, he owned Sunbeam Plastics. He flew the hump. There's another guy named Lloyd Brinker. He flew the hump. I don't know what kind of plane that Ellis Carson flew, but Lloyd Brinker flew a 46. And Irv flew in the 46, a C-46. So we have a display of that. But the hump is pretty important in that we had to get a lot of things from India to China. Close to, it was about, well, tons, a lot of tons there. Now tell us why the radio was important at that time and what you did to help these planes get over the hump. It's one of the most dangerous flights you can think of. If you think the Indian Ocean is warm and the Himalayas are cold, and the cold hits the warm, and it gets a lot of turbulence. tons of turbulence. They said some of the currents were as high as 257 miles an hour. That's not very common, but some planes even turned upside down. Some people didn't come back. It was called Tin Alley or Aluminum Alley. It was a 500-mile trip from India to Kunming, China, where he was based in both places, trying to keep these pilots safe. So tell us a little about how you did the radios and what you did with those.
Well, we had the equipment operated by diesel engines, and it would put a signal out. This was 24 hours a day, and put a signal out from India over to China. They had the same kind of equipment. It was well, I guess you could say almost like a computer, but we had to be on guard all the time to be sure that the signal was going on, because we had planes flying over the hump. Now the hump is about, I'd say 14,000 feet high, and some of the boys didn't make it, but a lot of them did come back. And we maintained that. It's called low-range equipment, long-range navigation. And it was a Navy equipment, and it was strictly updated. There wasn't anything like it outside of the war. Low-range equipment. Thank you.
So the LORAN equipment, I think, has been made obsolete by GPS and some other things, but shot radio waves to the plane and back, and also to the top of the Himalayas back. So they have one station over in India and one over in China, and he went to both stations and made sure they ran all right. They needed a diesel engine to make them work okay. Now, tell us about your experience in China and what the culture was like then. You were a 22, 23-year-old young man. What did it seem like to you, and also in India? Tell us what the experience was like there, Herb.
Well, China and India were very poor people, natives. In fact, I want to tell you about the stations we had in India was, we had the diesel running there also, and it was right close to the jungle. Now, our residence there that we lived in was right 50 yards possibly from a village. We got to know the people in the village, but you talk about poor, boy, between that and China, you look at it today and you wonder way back when they were just strictly huts and boxes made so people could work and live in them. And it was really tragic to see something like that, but that's the way it was. And you put people over there, I know when I got to Kunming, China, there was beggars laying on the sidewalk with open cuts in their legs, and they would just keep that open cut open so they could get money. They were, I mean, it was something else compared to what we had over here.
Okay, you can build up some questions for Herb, because they're going to stay on stage after we're done, and I'm going to let now John Bender talk a little bit. And so Herb's going to answer questions a little bit. You can write them down if you can't remember them, but if you can remember them, just remember them. We don't provide pencil and paper today. The next gentleman here is John Martin Bender, and I'll make sure yours is on. Test it here, John. Testing. All right. Okay, now, I want the back row to tell us when his volume is right.
Can you hear me?
Okay, they're all right for now. Now, you gotta keep it there. Now, John is a retired urologist, so if you have prostate problem or bladder problem, he took care of people for years here. And he's retired right now. He was actually, he has a hat that says World War II, he also has one in Korea, so you don't find veterans of both wars. But we've not talked a lot about Korea, but I wanted to focus a little bit more on Korea. You can tell us a little bit about what you did in 44 and 45 in World War II, and what Cleveland was like. He went to the, whatever the name of that school is. What's the name of that school in Cleveland?
Case Western.
Case Western Reserve. That's a very prestigious medical school there. So he's there 44, 45, but then after he explains that, in and out of the Army or in the Army, and then what he did in Korea, because we don't hear much about Korea. Go ahead, John.
All right. Thank you for inviting me. I actually was in both wars. The first thing that happened to me was that I had to make it into medical school, the Case Western Reserve, at the time that Hitler was in his prime, and the Battle of the Bulge was carrying on. And if I hadn't been accepted in medical school, I would have been right up there in the Battle of the Bulge, and we all know what happened there. Actually, when I was in medical school, there was 80 of us that they were turning out to be doctors, but they didn't let up on the academics, and they worked as hard than ever. And the war proceeded and ended when I was a senior in medical school. There was a tremendous celebration at the end of World War II in Cleveland. Over 1 million people came and celebrated the end of the war, and I thought, well, this is it. I was discharged from the Army, but the Army trained us while we were in medical school. And then when the war ended, proceeded to get further training, internship, surgical residency, and urology. So when I was just about through with all my training, we were scrubbing in surgery at the University of Iowa when a nurse came in and said, Uncle Sam has sent us a letter to you. They need you in Korea. So I thought, oh boy, they really did need me. They put me through two times I went through basic training. You might not think that was so much, but that was in Camp Pickett in Virginia in preparation to going overseas. They had us in a pit with a tank rolled over us. We had all sorts of things happen, crawl on a machine gun fire at night. And I was well trained as a doctor in the infantry. However, when I got to Korea, I didn't use any of those skills. They were afraid to give the doctors any weapons. They were more dangerous with the weapons. My proceedings were strictly as a doctor. But when I finally got in the Korean War, I was in a prison camp. And the prison camp was called Kojido. And it had 50,000 prisoners, 50,000 North Korean communist prisoners. And we had we had 10 compounds of 500. In one compound, we had 5,000 patients with tuberculosis. We had 4 surgeons, one of which was me, and the enemy was constantly trying to escape and would go through the barbed wire and get machine gun, hoping that the American doctors would save them. And so I hadn't been there 2 weeks and nothing seemed to happen when our surgical senior said, "Come on, we got a case going." Well, he had tried to escape. It was machine gun. The bullet went right through his stomach, through his liver, out his lung, and he said, "We may be able to save him." They tried to escape, knowing they were going to be killed in the compound by the other prisoners, and hoped that the American doctors could save him in surgery. And that one first case, for example, and there were numerous others over the 2 years over there. An example was this North Korean communist prisoner was trying to escape because he was really from the South, and he knew the prisoners were going to kill him. So they figured maybe the doctors could save him. And the bullet went through his abdomen, out through his liver, and went over his lung. And we had him in surgery, and they asked me to assist the surgeon. And he said, I'm handling all this stuff. He said, "John, you go ahead and open the left side of the abdomen and see what you find." Well, I'll open that, and the blood shot right up to the ceiling, and the bullet had clipped the left renal artery. He said, "Well, you can't repair that artery. John, go ahead and remove that kidney." Well, I had a lot of training, but like all doctors, you have to learn how to do the surgery. And so I dissected it out, got the gland off, and was able to remove the kidney. And he said, I'm gonna spend my time stopping. I think we can save this kid. You take care of that. And he got the bleeding stopped. Special treatment to the lung. And that was a typical case where we were able to save these young people who were actually North Korean soldiers, but some of them screened south, and they were eliminated by their own people. And if they screened south, they were candidates to be removed by their own prison people that were all North Koreans. One thing that they did, I probably shouldn't even mention, but they would have them remove their trousers and stand over a bonfire. Most of them died. But we had, when I got there, 6 or 7 patients that had been through that torture and had 3rd-degree burns, and they were all going to succumb. And then all other doctors had moved out. They'd been there 2 years. They said, "You can take care of them." Well, one of the things I was able to do is do pitch grafts. So we did pitch grafts, take little tiny bits of skin off their back and put them on the pelvic organs that had been the site of 3rd-degree burns. And all those pitch grafts took, we were able to save seven of the patients that way. The doctor's attitude was to save the prisoners and treat them like they were our own. But we could have not allowed a lot of them to be lost. They were the enemy. But they were human beings, and we knew the war would end, and it was our job to try to save them. And that was important in the way we thought about it, because we had times when we could have just allowed them to be removed. And
John, I want you to also elaborate on A little bit about, just quickly about tuberculosis, and then we got another speaker here. And then the last thing about tuberculosis, then how all these, when the war was over, how were the prisoners transported back to Korea?
I don't know, it's teased. The prison camp where we had 50,000 prisoners on Kojido, and we had 2,000 prisoners on Jeju-do. There were the officers that were separated from the enlisted men, and they were very dangerous as they were kept off on a separate island. And they had communist sports, and they were against the rules of war. And they would hand grenades with tear gas in them to stop their activities, which were against the rules. And one, the ones that were the senior members, the high-ranking ones, were the hardest ones to deal with. And so in all those 10 compounds, we had all those cases to deal with. But what we were mentioning is that of these 50,000 prisoners, 5,000 of them had tuberculosis. Well, I got interested in investigating tuberculosis here recently, and I found out that going back as far as 2,500 years BC, that 7 out of your life expectancy in America was greatly limited by tuberculosis, because it's about 7 to 10 people died of tuberculosis, the leading cause of death, right up until the Korean War. That's hard to believe.
So really a big instance of tuberculosis there, and remember he saw a lot of streptomycin being given, then INH developed and some other things, because he's a urologist, a lot of these hit the urological organs. You had to take kidneys out that had a lot of tuberculosis on them and things in the prison. So, but I think you can ask some questions of John after I get Alan to talk, and Alan's going to say some of his experiences about what happened to him. Now, Alan was in World War II, and he's on the board here at the Evansville Wartime Museum. He's been a big contributor. And so, Alan, I think Jeff Dog may ask you some questions, or Alan, you can. I'm going to give you the microphone here.
Okay.
You got one. I don't need 2. I don't need 3. Test it.
Now, can I have one back?
Right there. Okay. If I'm going to come after you if you doesn't say it there. Okay. Can you hear it back?
Can you hear me?
Okay, you got to keep it there. Tell us when you can't hear it. Okay, go ahead, and Jeff's going to lead this.
Thanks, Mark. So I don't have to eat the microphone. I'm going to try and keep it as close as I can in my mouth.
Can you hear it in the back? If you can't hear it, Jeff.
Okay. First of all, a lot of people think that the 47 is a fighter plane. It did more as strafing and bombing. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. But one of the interesting things, Alan received most of his training in the southern part, the eastern southern states. Again, I would like to Alan to talk a little bit about when you were ready to go overseas, where you went and how you got there and what your mode of transportation was and things like that.
Well, we went through pilot training, a whole course, and then we finally got to go overseas, and we left in November of 43. Sorry about that. Yeah, okay. Sorry about that, but we left in November 43, and we went over in Liberty ship, and after the Liberty ship, we landed in Oran, and that was in North Africa, and then the ship that was following with us had our 47s. And these were the first 47s that were introduced into the Italian campaign. So we waited around and got the 47s, and then we took a couple of trips to where we had to pick them up, and we lived in boxcars, and we had sea rations and so forth. But anyway, it took 2 days to get to where we were going, and then we picked up the 47s and flew into Foggia, Italy. And there was the first 47s to come into the Italian campaign.
So, one of the things that I found interesting as you went from Iran to Tunis, that was all in North Africa, what kind of planes were you flying before you could take the P-47s?
Well, we weren't flying planes because we were just getting there. The first planes we flew were 47s, and the old P-40 was the one that they used in the desert coming up through the North Africa.
And the 57 fighter group, before you guys got there, were flying P-40 Warhawks, right?
Yes.
Okay. And then, so when you flew, you were bringing brand new P-47s up to Foggia, and then another thing, while you guys were in North Africa, what were these little pets that you ended up naming your squadron after?
The black scorpions?
Yeah, so the black scorpions got to be not a little too friendly with them by crawling in their boots at night and stuff like that.
Yep. They crawl in and make themselves at home. If you didn't shake the boot out in the morning, well, you're in trouble.
So if you noticed on the nose art of the P-47 that is painted like Alan's, it's got a black scorpion inside of that. But then it's also got there's a triangle on that the black scorpion is. Can you tell me what that represents? That it was on one of your day trips that you flew, when you flew over to North Africa just on a joyride to where you got to see the pyramids? It looks like a pyramid shape to me that the scorpion is on the nose art. Yeah. So that's the story behind that. There was a B-25, I think, flew several of you guys over to Alexandria, and while you were there, you were eating at a restaurant, and you looked at the table right next to you, and was there somebody special sitting next to the table, or at the table?
Yes. The first thing about it is they didn't even know there was a war going on over there. And so we took a B-25, and 6 of us made a trip over. And we were sitting in the restaurant having Coke, which was hard for us to get in the unit. And noticed this band next to us ordered. And it was King Farouk. Do you remember him? Well, he was a young man that became king real quick.
That was King of Egypt. So something else I remember that you told me about Cokes. That Cokes were really considered a luxury, I guess. And but you guys didn't take quite so much of them. What would you do sometimes instead of drinking Coke?
Well, we got 3 Cokes every 2 weeks, and I guess that was through the Red Cross. But we take the Cokes and go up in the mountains and trade for fresh eggs, because the powdered eggs weren't very much.
Okay, let's talk a little bit about, first of all, can you tell people when we're talking about the difference between strafing and dive bombing?
Well, strafing, you got 8 50 calibers. They're just like this model we have out here. And you go down and strafe, and you pick any target that looks like it would be an enemy. We did a lot of strafing on steam engines. They all carried quite a crew, and invariably they would have probably, I would say they'd have 8-10 cars behind them, and if you could put one of those locomotives out, why, it slowed up everything. And believe me, those 850 calibers would take a locomotive out real quick.
Interesting. What was the main purpose of your strafing and your dive bomb? What were you trying to do to the Germans?
Well, our operation was called Strangle, and our position was that we were trying to keep the enemy from getting out supplies and bringing things in. So basically it was Operation Strangle.
Okay. And you were flying at bases like that were Bosia, Naples, Corsica, things like that, areas. What were your geographic targets? In other words, most of the targets or the missions that you flew were in what part of Europe?
Well, it was everything from south of Rome till we got past Rome, and then from then on it was everything all the way up to France.
So basically, northern Italy and southern France.
Yes.
Okay. Mm-hmm. When you were defined a mission, a lot of times we think of everybody, the alarm goes off, all the pilots go running out to their planes, and that was more like the Battle of Britain. But the types of missions that you were flying, it sounded like they were pretty well defined. And what were your main targets? You mentioned trains. What were some of your other main targets that you would be going at?
Well, we get troops. We get anything that was military that was on the ground. We try to hit it. We had some boats, harbor that we had boats that belonged to the enemy.
Convoys.
Do what?
Convoys like trucks and jeeps and.
Well, yeah, we had those too, but I was talking about the harbor. We had boats.
Okay. And airfields, enemy airfields, I assume would be your target sometime?
Yeah, we got quite a few airplanes before they took off, and most of the kills were on the ground, really.
When you would leave, you had both bombs that you could be dropping. You had primary targets and secondary targets, and you had strafing. What normal sequence would you go to? What would you go after first?
Well, basically, we dropped the bombs because we needed to get rid of the bombs. Then, because there would be a reason that the enemy either was contacting us or something, but we got rid of the bombs. That's the first thing.
And then, and as you were flying back to your home field, if you had any strafing capabilities left, you would just go after anything that looked like a legitimate target. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. There's a special term that you talked to me about one time, and that you called it skit bombing. I had never heard that term used before. Can you tell a little bit about what that is?
Well, northern Italy was just full of mountains, and there was a lot of places that they had tunnels under. These tunnels were great for trains that were high and so forth. But so if you caught one, or you knew one was in there, you'd go down and drop your bombs, and they would actually hit the ground and go inside before they exploded.
And the train stopped, either that or blown up, right? I said, then the train is either stuck in the tunnel.
Well, yeah,
or
not many trains came out.
Okay. When relative to strafing and dive bombing, I know there was one dive bombing mission that was special to you, where you were you were the wingman of the squadron command. And can you tell about that a little bit about Captain?
Well, I was head of our unit. There was 12 planes in the unit, and there was right at the foot of this big white building. There was this 20 millimeter, just peppered us up there. It was going off all around us, and so I got over my wingman by radio, and I said, I think I'm going down and get that shot. And by the time I was ready to roll over and go down, he came back on me and said, Sandy, I wouldn't do that. I think that's Leaning Tower Pizza. Then to continue this story, 3 days later we were coming into the same area, and same guns shoot, and I got a hit in the wing, and it was a pretty good hit. The plane had frozen controls. It would only do, believe me, it would only do 360 degrees left. And so my wingman got on the radio, and he called off the airspeed, and we did 360 degree turns all the way back to our base. I think it took about an hour.
So there was another time where you were flying as wingman for Captain Art Exon, and you were on a bombing run, I remember. Can you elaborate on that?
This is one of my first missions. I was flying a wing of our commander, Art Exon, and we went into strafing a building. It just looked like an ordinary building. And sure enough, the thing went up in a big blast. And the last I saw him, he was caught in the middle of the blast. And I never did see him come out. But we learned later on that he was a prisoner of war. And he spent 2 years in there.
And then thinking that not everybody came out alive from being a prisoner of war, but you guys had reunions every now and then, every 5 or 10 years and stuff like that. What happened at your 10th reunion?
At the 10th reunion.
Yeah, in that, did you see Art again?
Oh, yeah. My wife and I were having dinner in San Antonio, and I looked over at this table, and I recognized this guy, and I said, "That's Art Exon." And Art was sitting there, and I walked over to him, and he says, "Hi, Sandy." And that was a good 3 years after that. So it's quite a recognition.
That's a good ending to a story. We talk about a lot of things. Alan, you guys they've just got tons of great stories. If you ever get a chance to just sit down and talk to them, they're a fantastic bunch of heroes.
I'd like all of you to pinch yourself to see this is really happening. You've got 3 99-year-old guys up on stage, all walking, talking, thinking, and that didn't happen very often. So just pinch yourself a little bit. See, this is really happening today.
Let's give them a hand.
You have to go to the bathroom, you have to leave, that's fine. We're going to open that up to the crowd, and we've got 6 microphones. So you have to say who you are directing the question to. You have to say who you are, and you have to speak loudly. And 1 inch from the microphone should be just like this, not like this, parallel to your mouth. And so if you don't have questions, we'll have people. We'll go probably another 20 minutes with question and answers. Then you can go get on the seminaries, look at the museum. Anybody in red is a volunteer, and they will answer any questions here. Okay. Okay, reservations for future events. This is the first Thursday of every month from 11 to 1. And my wife is going to talk about that.
Just real quickly, I think that the front desk and also in the SWRCA circulation, it has an email. And we're going to try to send as much as we can through emails to get the threads of keeping, proper reservations in order. So there are a few that have
email.
And if you don't have email, that's okay to call, but it really makes it a lot easier and easier to follow and to track.
She's been taking care of the reservations, so her phone has burnt up 2 or 3 times. So if you do have email be easier on her. I don't want to wear out my welcome. I've already think I've worn it out. But anyway, so now somebody has a question, and we have to know who it's to here. Anybody over here have a question? Here, back here. Then I will ask a general question to all 3 of them. Did you, I went to war in the Persian Gulf, and I had 2 little babies, one in the oven and one was half a year old, and it was, a lot of warriors are here, and when you go into harm's way, that's a worry. I want to know, all of you did certain things in these wars. I want you to tell us, did you have any fear at all? We'll first talk with Herb. Did you have any fear when you went up to all these places?
No, not necessarily. When you're young like that, nothing bothers you. You just go on living and think about it.
He says, don't worry about things. I was 39, I wasn't 22, and I was a little worried about not coming back. So the age changes you a little bit. Were you worried about when you went over to Korea that you were going to come back? You had one baby in the oven, and 1 baby already on the earth, I think.
I was worried all the time because not to be killed, but from getting tuberculosis, because we had a whole 500 people we were treating with tuberculosis, and they had all the extra pulmonary complications with urinary tract and bullets and the various things that doctors took care of, and we were constantly exposed to the tuberculosis, which is very difficult to treat when you get rid of it. And we could spend the next half hour talking about how we now have treatment for tuberculosis, and that was discovered during the Korean War, and it was streptomycin. And we gave, the prisoners went through a line every day and got PAS, and twice a week got streptomycin. And there was no other place in the world that had that many patients with tuberculosis. And that was the first time in history that patients with tuberculosis could be treated and presented a new approach to the disease that had started 2,500 years BC. So this war in Korea was a milestone for medicine because we finally had a drug and knew how to get rid of this particular disease.
Thank you, John. And so John was worried about medicine, tuberculosis. Herb wasn't worried about anything, and I was scared to death. But Alan, you got a microphone yourself. We don't need two here. There, it's on now. You tell me you were scared at all.
Was I scared? Every mission I was scared. But after a while, it just became an experience that you just didn't worry about, and you didn't think about it anymore. I didn't even talk about it for 10 years.
Okay, I'm walking out in the crowd. If anybody's got any questions, we've got one over here. This young gentleman, you've got to identify yourself, and you got to turn the other way so the camera can get you. Stand up, sir, please. Okay, you put
To Alan,
your name.
Norman Kohler, Kohler, a plumbing fixture. Got some papers for you about, I was at the launching of an LST. That has nothing to do with this, but the Battle of the Bulge, did you get far enough north, Alan, to, when the weather cleared and they brought the Air Force in to be there, and a friend of mine was a belly gunner in a B-17, and they flew the B-17s over there. They didn't have any bombs on them and machine gun ammunition and nothing. They just wanted planes in the air to scare the Germans, and I didn't know if you were there or not.
Alan, put the microphone up. You heard the question, Alan? All the way down. That's it. Good.
Well, we saw B-17s. We escorted a couple of times, but that's about it. B-17s were as predominant in Italy as they were up in France, because you had the run from London all the way to Berlin.
Other questions? Anybody else out here? Yes, sir. That's Mr. Stephen Bretto. If you could just yell at the microphone. But Stephen Bretto is a CB from Vietnam Air, and so CB is the one that made all the runways and everything else that we needed after we conquered somewhere. I'll bring the microphone. Just okay. So, question else? Brian, just let Brian Bretto. And he's got a company that will fix your locks.
Mr. Sanderson, you were stationed in Tunisia for a while. Is that what I understood correctly? No? Okay, my dad was in the Army Air Corps over in Africa and Italy, and that I didn't know what unit you were stationed over there with.
I was in the 57th Fighter Group, and we were in Iran, but we weren't in Tunisia.
Okay, well, he probably caught up to you later because that was the group he was in too. He was a sergeant and he was a mechanic in there. So, kind of interesting to see where the paths might have crossed along the way. Dad's been gone a long time, but he would have been really interested in being out here. Thank you all three of you for your service. We appreciate that.
Thank you.
When the war was over, what did you all, your 57 fighter group do? Did you hear me?
Yes, I heard you. Well, we were like most groups. We finally got.
There you go, closer to the mouth, closer straight up.
We finally got together and started having reunions, and these reunions went on for annually for about 15 years, and finally broke up. It was good to see old war mates, so to speak, and see families, and it's just a good experience, and we hate to see it break up. And incidentally, there's a museum like this in New England and Hartford, Connecticut, and it's got a 47, and it's got a plaque of all the names of the people that were in the 47 group, and it's well done, almost as nice as this.
Okay, we've got Earl Fetcher here who's going to ask a question. Used to be a principal at Chandler and then in Paoli, and he's a flyboy, and he volunteers on the LST. So he's got a question for one of the three of you. He's a flyboy.
Yes, I enjoy flying, about 6,000 hours as a commercial pilot flight instructor, but what I really want to do, when you talk about flying, it gives me cold chills, of course, but I wonder how many hours and how many missions did you fly, and how many hours did you compile during your service? During your service?
Well, I lost track of hours, but I flew 118 missions, and that was enough.
Thank you, and we, all of us, appreciate all three of you being here. And happy next birthday.
Anybody else have a question? We've got a question right here. This young gentleman says YouTube, something Hunter, Operation Strangle follow-up. Is that what you just talked about? Operation Strangle is on YouTube if you search it by Hunter or something. Hunter. Okay, thank you very much. So if you want to learn more about it on YouTube, I have a young lady here. Why don't you say your name and...
My name is Hazel Tuberculosis, and I want to ask Dr. Bender. Dr. Bender, did you give yourself anything special because you was around so much tuberculosis? I mean, it's almost impossible that you did catch it. Did you do something special?
I lost one of my earphones this week, so I'm in trouble.
She said, did you do anything special to protect yourself from tuberculosis because you're exposed to so much?
Thank you for that question. The huge number of patients that we had were all isolated in one area and all received their streptomycin twice a week. So we didn't have to protect ourselves from them. The ones that the doctors actually saw were the ones that had invasion of the tuberculosis into the other organs, as the kidney and urinary tract and the bones and even the brain were the chief obstacles for the tuberculosis to get out of the lung, which is the primary place that tuberculosis starts. And when they developed the complications outside the lung, they were seen by in the Quonset hut where the doctors worked on them, and when we were operating on them, such as removing a kidney, which I did several times, or the orthopedist doing saucerizations of the bone, yes, you wore a mask when you were in surgery, but you didn't wear a mask otherwise. Good question, thank you.
Yes, Mike. Good, yeah. Okay, yeah. Well, this is the only one that works very well. So, yeah, this one. Okay, go ahead and identify yourself, sir.
I'm Steve Mark. Alan Steve Page here. Alan, can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you. Steve Page here with a question. 118 missions seems like more than just a few. And, but you didn't rotate back to the States until after 118 missions. Was there a set number of missions, or was it until you get the job done?
No, we didn't rotate like they did in England, 25 missions, 50 missions. We kept flying until the flight of the officer in charge of medicine. If he deemed that we were through, why, that was it.
Over where Herb was over in Flying the Hump, and Lloyd Brinker, he got out after I think he had 670 hours of flying, and they rotated him back as an instructor here. But it wasn't very common. He got out of the Flying the Hump area. But where Herb was, it's in his books, Mr. Brinker, that he did get to rotate after you got so many hours over. So I guess maybe Alan didn't have enough, I don't know. Other questions? Other questions from anybody? Raise your hands if you got a question. We got other microphones back there. Mr. Team found some more. Oh, here we go from Mr. Jack Buttram. He's the one to help a lot of this happen here today.
Say, Doctor.
Alan, you mentioned once that you did some support for the invasion of Normandy. Some of us have been over there, and it would be interesting to me if I could learn what you did during that invasion.
Well, we were on Corsica, and so the closest thing we had was southern France. Southern France. And so our mission on D-Day was to hit the Germans from behind and keep them from retreating. And basically it was about an hour and a half flight up there. So it was trying, but it was typical. We didn't know anything about D-Day until that morning, and we were told that there was an invasion.
Okay, other questions? Anybody? All right, I can't thank you enough for being here to honor these three soldiers and Air Corps guys. Thank you very much. We'll see you next month, and make sure you visit the museum, look around things, and make sure you go back to the simulators. You got 2 experienced pilots to show you how to fly. Back that way with the simulators on. Thank you.